So getting into volume 19 of DanMachi, this will be a multi-part video because there is a lot of things to discuss about major characters, major events, and where the story will go, and the strengths and weaknesses, because there is a lot of strengths and weaknesses in this volume and in previous volumes to discuss about as a whole package, because a lot of fans have complained about where the story is going and it being too focused on the harem aspect, which is one of the things that I'm going to be talking about in this video, is to do with a particular elf, Ryuu, however you want to pronounce it, and her confession towards Belle, because in the previous volume she did make a major confession basically saying, hey, I love you, Belle, and Belle is in this kind of skittish mode, and it makes sense, and I liked this touch in the volume, that Belle is actually scared to reject her. And the reason being is very straightforward. He saw what happened when he rejected Sia. Sia went crazy mode, turned into Freya, and ended up kidnapping him, brainwashing everyone in the city, and the event played out the way it did. So Belle is a little bit scared to maybe be a little bit more forthcoming and say, hey, I'm not in love with you, I'm in love with someone else, and reject the advancements of the girls. But at the same time, this is the funny part about the series, is that most of the girls that are with Belle and are part of the harem already know Belle's in love with someone else, but they're still trying to fight for his affection, which is Hestia and some of the other members. Like, they know Belle's in love with Eyes. They know he's chasing Eyes in the sense of trying to rise to her level as an adventurer and be side by side and want to be with her, yet they're still chasing her. And this is one of the complaints about the actual story, is that it's too focused on the harem and adding too many girls. And that was one of the things that I brought up, is the concern about if they just keep adding more girls, is the story going to be able to keep up with all of these new characters? And that's why I kind of thought maybe they might sideline some of them, try and keep the familiar members down to a minimal amount. And I had two possible theories, that they were going to add her later on as a member and have her as like an ambassador, or they would just straight out add her as a familiar member, and they did the straight out one. I thought they might keep her with her other familiar members just so that they could be introduced to the story, have new characters, new crazy adventures going on, and then Belle can interact with them, but she's decided to join Hestia's familiar, which does make sense as well because of how much she works alongside them, and it adds another member to them, to the group, to allow them to go even deeper again. And that's one other thing as well, is their way of adding more power to the group is not just giving more levels to Belle, it's also adding new members that are a higher level. But at the same time, some of the other members are still quite low level. And this is something I brought up in many volumes ago, was my concern that Belle is getting too strong too quickly, and he's getting too far ahead of everyone else. And so it's going to be a challenge for lower level members to try and keep up with Belle. It just seems like he's just leapfrogging every sort of major step, and it's just, how do you keep up with someone like him? Which is an interesting challenge that the author is going to have to face. But going back to the previous point, is that she has joined Hestia's familiar. She's very much keeping close to Belle. There's the fun rivalry that we all know and love in the series, where the other girls are kind of keeping her off Belle because, again, she's making advancements, and Belle is, again, also scared to do a rejection. But I still feel that Belle needs to kind of step up and say, hey, I have feelings for someone else, and be very clear about it, because the more he procrastinates this, the more the situation is going to get worse. Then you also look at Sia as well. She is still in the city itself, and Hermes played a part in this, which makes sense because Hermes can pull a lot of strings, you know, rub a couple of good shoulders and get everyone on the good side, because a lot of the gods were mocking Sia or Freya for the whole situation, the fact that now she's taking that lower plane identity, but also some of them were not happy about her still being in the city and her having some certain members still part of city. Because one of my thoughts was that Otter would be like a sort of a shadow for Belle, kind of keep him protected and be there for when he needs training or help, or maybe could do the same for Eyes. But Otter is very much that shadow for Sia, where if she needs someone, he's still there. And this came into the previous point that I brought up, which was exactly the thing that I brought, was that you can't get rid of Sia. Like, if Sia disappeared, or Freya disappeared, whichever name you want to go with, her familiars would have just left the city. They would have just gone elsewhere, and it would have made massive problem as far as a power vacuum going on, but also digging deeper into the dungeon, because they need people to dig deep into the dungeon to explore, to gain materials, to gain experience, etc. Not having Freya's familiar would have been a massive issue as far as having people there to protect the city as well from outside attacks, but also inside the dungeon itself. So Freya needs to be there, and her being a sort of subordinate to Hestia makes sense. So that does resolve one issue that I was concerned about, because it is a thing that many light novel readers brought up is, hey, if Sia's gone, or Freya, what's going to happen? What's going to happen to all those members? They will all just leave the city out of pure spite. So many of them have stayed around, some of them are doing their own thing, and as time goes on, they'll join different familiar members, etc., and they'll slowly be absorbed into other groups. But it's very clear that Hestia's familiar is getting a lot of power very quickly, and it is raising some eyebrows, and that is something that's noted in this volume, is that a lot of people are getting a little bit worried, because Hestia went from just having Belle, then having a supporter, and then a blacksmith, and then suddenly it just jumped, and now they've got all these powerful members, and Belle is leveling at an extremely fast rate. So it just shows that her familiar members are gaining a lot of power, so she's ranking up very quickly, and it's raising a lot of eyebrows. It would be alright if it was very slow and gradual, but this is like giant leaps in power. And it's only a matter of time before new members join, because it's clear at the end of this volume that there are going to be possibly new members, or a new member, depending on how this plays out, particularly to do with the education district. And I find it really, it kind of reminds me a little bit of like Harry Potter, where you had that like floating ship that pops out. It just kind of reminded me of that, being like having this mystical thing that rocks up, and it's like a giant education district. I think it's really cool. I love that little attention to detail, and it's something that I'll be talking about further on. But there is a massive power vacuum going on, and seeing the things play out the way it does is very fascinating. Where the story goes from there, I am looking forward to. But as a lot of fans have criticized, they don't want too much focus on the harem, which is fair enough. People want the adventure, they want going deeper into the dungeon, learning about the one-eyed black dragon. That is something that's brought up, and it's clear that that is the path that Belle's going to go. I mean, it was established from the very beginning. The major quest is where Belle's endgame is, and Eyes as well, and they're clearly going to have to come together to fight that major quest. But if they're focusing too much on the harem, it distracts away from the major story. When Belle does finally say, hey, I'm in love with Eyes, and lays down that, but at the same time, familiar members, they know what Belle feels towards Eyes. And I think this is where a lot of anime-only fans are getting confused, because they just think Eyes is just a part of like the harem, and she's not going to be a critical part of the romance. It's very much established in the game, or the mobile game, the backstory, the main story itself, and even in the side stories, that Eyes is the end game as far as the romance goes. But because of the fact that the story is focusing so much on the harem aspect, I think a lot of fans are getting confused at where the story is going, and a lot of people have been criticizing the writer that they are getting a little bit, in different colorful ways, bad, lazy, etc. as far as the story goes. I wouldn't go to that extreme, but I definitely understand where the concern is coming from. For me, I do love some of the bantering between the characters. It is fun, but I do agree that they do need to build up Eyes a lot more in the main story, not just only in the side story. Because even in the side story, which has got the Loki familiar members, there's a lot of stuff going into other characters and not so much Eyes. So there needs to be some focus on her and building her character up and building the relationship between Belle and Eyes. It doesn't just have to be romance. It can be them working together to overcome a common goal. And I think that's something that needs to be done, and maybe that's something that will be worked on in the future arc once this education district arc has been finished. So again, I'd love to know your thoughts in the comment section down below. I will be doing another further, maybe 1 or 2 videos, maybe more, on this particular volume, and also going into the side story volumes as well that have come out. So definitely stay subscribed for more DanMachi content. I know I haven't done much in lately, but again, things have been hectic in my life. So again, if you like this video, hit the like, subscribe, and I'll see you beautiful nerds in the next video.